Nathan Drake, the main character of the Uncharted series, is easily one of PlayStation's most beloved characters and is generally depicted as a hero. Sure, he's a thief, but he's insanely charismatic and his adventures are driven by a deep admiration for history rather than greed. He's also responsible for thousands of murders. This contrast between his somewhat heroic story and overly murderous gameplay is sometimes referred to as ludonarrative dissonance. So, even though Nathan is our favorite murdering adventurer, I wanted to see if he could tone it down just a bit for an entire playthrough of Uncharted 4 by killing as few enemies as possible. The rules for this playthrough are very straightforward. Since Uncharted 4 has a stats page, thank God, with enemies defeated, we're going off of that. Nothing else matters, and we can still shoot, punch, kiss any enemies that come our way, so long as they don't add to this counter. This made my playthrough a constant game of pausing to check that my kill stats didn't change, and also reloading saves, because if you accidentally kill an enemy and restart the checkpoint, that will still add to your number of defeated enemies in your stats. I should point out immediately that I'm not even going to entertain the idea that you can beat this game without taking out at least a few enemies, because Nathan is just that bloodthirsty. Also, our allies are allowed to get kills, because that doesn't add to the stat, and the stat is enemies defeated rather than kills, but I'm going to use them interchangeably because, well, Nathan kills people. I'm also playing through without glitches and on hard difficulty. I attempted this on crushing for about 6 or 7 chapters, but that was way too much even for a masochist like myself. So let's get into answering the question. How many enemies must be defeated in Uncharted 4? So remember about 10 seconds ago when I said that I wasn't even going to entertain a no kills run? The prologue is why. Literally right off the bat, this game turns us into a killing machine without trying. As Nate, you need to steer a boat through some rough waves while avoiding all of the other boats because hitting any one of them will add to our kill counter. The engine busts and you have to take cover while Sam fixes it, but his ass does not know how to fix that thing. Because I took cover while enemies shot at me, and he didn't do a thing. There are 2 enemies shooting from another boat, and it halts progress until you kill one of them. After which, a grenade launcher guy spawns, and you have to kill him immediately, or he sinks your ship and you start over. Luckily, killing him gets rid of the enemy ship, so shout out grenade launcher guy for his efforts, but that's still 2 kills right away. Literally 1 minute into the game, and the playthrough is messed up. What the hell? Following that, Sam is still slow to be useful, so there are 2 more boats with an enemy on each one, but for some reason they just leave right away, and then another boat appears with 2 more enemies, and the game halts progress until you kill them. After taking them out, we're at 4 enemies defeated. The rest of this chapter is just riding your boat until a scripted event occurs, so I think this chapter should be 4 kills.
But wait! There's more!
After starting the next one and double checking my stats, it was 6 kills. I went back and discovered that the 3 boats pursuing you at the end of the mission actually count as enemies defeated, even if you don't touch them. I left my controller alone and they all sank and counted as enemies defeated. If they run into the many rocks in the water, they count as enemies defeated. I tried this for over an hour and couldn't get that number down below 6, so even though I am nowhere near these guys, it adds to the stats and brings our enemies defeated count to 6. I also thought it was hilarious during this prologue I earned the ludonarrative dissonance trophy, which is unlocked for killing 1,000 enemies, so cool. The next chapter is a flashback, and fortunately, young Nate holds his murderous tendencies inside, so this chapter doesn't add to our count at all. Flash forward to prison with Nate getting his face beat in, but he actually wins this fight and this doesn't add to our counter. However, later on we get an encounter where infinite enemies spawn in the laundry room, and even if you just run around, this section continues to spawn enemies. They even get back up off the floor just to spite me. The only way to get through this encounter is to take down 6 enemies, and that spawns in this boss enemy who you also need to take out to finish the encounter, but he doesn't add to our stats. Sam and Rafe will keep fighting off enemies and punching them to the floor, but this part requires player action until it will let you through this fight. Technically, Nathan doesn't kill these guys because, as I mentioned, infinite enemies keep coming at you, and there's an animation showing the knockdown enemies getting back up just to fight and get their asses beat again. Either way, it does add 6 to our enemies defeated counter. Then we go for a quick run, Sam takes out these guards and then says see you later for 15 years. No more killing in this chapter, so we're all good. Things calm down a little in the next 2 chapters since the only violence is shooting a Nerf gun at some targets and Crash Bandicoot.
Smash Brandy's cooch.
We reenact Avatar: The Way of Water and we get some quality one-on-one time with Elena. Then we dive right into more action as Sam is such a good liar that the game makes an entire chapter for his Hector Alcazar self-insert fanfiction. Hector breaks Sam out of prison, allegedly, and does all the heavy lifting too. You can just take cover while the guards shoot at you, and our favorite deceased drug lord saves the day. Going back to the present, once a thief is basically all set up for the heist, and therefore there isn't much combat here. You just use stealth and some maneuvering to get to the power room, and unfortunately, Uncharted 4 completely rips off the cinematic masterpiece Uncharted 2022 here with its plot, where Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg go to an auction house to steal a cross. I also stole the idea from that movie of being kind of inept when it came to action, but that's beside the point. After you shut off the power, you head back and you can just stay in stealth or keep moving. Eventually, you get a meet and greet with Nadine, and on your way out, you're trapped in a spot where Sam throws you a gun and you can't move. He then does nothing and wants you to shoot the enemies, but if you waste all of your bullets and don't hit anyone here, then Sam will kill the enemies immediately, so no kills here.
Nice shooting! You alright?
Also a note that this strategy doesn't work in the prologue because you have infinite ammo for the boat ride, so no matter how much you try to miss, Sam never helps you out. To one-up Tom Holland in the Uncharted movie, video game Nate tries his best Spider-Man impression, and it does not go well.
Jesus Christ, Nathan!
Which lands him in a room with a bunch of armed enemies. This was my first big test of the game. I spent about 3 hours on this part, and ultimately it led to me lowering the difficulty from crushing to hard. Sam will slowly pick off enemies, and you kind of have to move around so he gets closer to them and takes them on pretty quickly with hand-to-hand combat, which is a theme for allies during the entire playthrough. But otherwise, he shoots at them for an extremely long time in order to kill. After Sam kills about 5 enemies, the doors open and more spawn in. On crushing, this was as far as I got, but at this point you can exit through the doors, and if you survive, it takes you to a final checkpoint outside. At the last area, you don't have to kill anyone, and once you reach a certain part of the level, Sully will appear, and by entering his car, we finish the mission with 0 kills and a cross that will lead us to the next location in our treasure hunt.
I hope I don't go to hell for this.
Don't worry, Sam, I can think of at least one other thing you might go to hell for. And now, on to Scotland. Here you run into a few shoreline guys who notice you immediately, and Sam starts shooting. I just ran away from these guys and got a checkpoint, so they ignored me. I found some dynamite and had to push a cart, but was blocked by more shoreline guys. I tried to let Sam kill them all, but got too impatient and had this weird strategy where I would juke them out, hide, and then push the cart a little, and then run away again, until I got the cart to the point where I needed to progress. So this encounter also had 0 kills. Next, you climb on a rock wall and are supposed to jump on a guy to knock him out, but this adds to our enemy's defeated stat if we do it. This guy won't move, and there isn't another spot you can safely drop from without dying or killing him. But if you're fast enough, you drop before he gets there and you don't have to knock him out. Then just run to the end of this section and avoid the enemies. Right after, there were 3 more enemies, and Sam killed 2 but wouldn't finish the last guy, so I had to just parkour and avoid him. On the way to the cathedral, Sam stealth killed 3 guys, and I was super impressed. Also, this line happened right after that.
Clearly we were meant to find it together.
Ah, so romantic.
Then we sneak by some enemies, and Sam did this weird teleport across the beams, like, I saw that dude. I'm onto you. Eventually we get to a cave, pretty groundbreaking I know, and it collapses, also groundbreaking. Shout out Nadine for that. Then you run through a bunch of enemies in this cave, and you get to a checkpoint outside. Okay, this took a lot of tries. The enemies here are super aggressive, but I found that if I shot one of them, it stopped him from damaging me too much, and I could make it to the next checkpoint. Outside the cave, I spent like 4 hours on this part. There are a ton of enemies that spawn in and are pretty aggressive. I kept running through and dying very stupidly, but eventually got Sam to kill them all, and it gave me a fat checkpoint. Then there's a ledge with a sniper and another guy. I didn't get Sam to take them out unfortunately, but I ignored both of them and climbed to the top of this section where a gauntlet of enemies awaited. If you get lucky with the timing of the swing and the position of the enemies, you can avoid being killed by them right away and climb onto this machine. Once you get to the other side, the enemies can't really hit you from that angle, so you just get the checkpoints and you're pretty much home free. So we get to Sully's plane, and we end this chapter with 0 additional kills. The 12 Towers takes us to Madagascar, which is filled with more mercenaries that Nathan is foaming at the mouth to murder. There's a large structure full of enemies by a bridge you need to cross, but as you drive on it, it breaks, and you need to use the wench, which you can't do until you completely clear the area of enemies. It didn't work when I tried to go into stealth either. Luckily, you get a ton of checkpoints for this section, so it's not too bad. I had to move around and let Sully and Sam take the guys out, but there was a sniper at the top of the tower with few shooting angles to hit him, and Sam and Sully refused to climb up there with me. I tried a strategy to counter the sniper hand to hand when he pushed me into the center pillar so he would stumble backwards off the tower, and I hoped it wouldn't count as a kill, but I couldn't get him to move back far enough to fall. Also, side note, enemies threw grenades at me the whole time, but it seems like for the whole game, enemy grenades don't actually damage the enemies. So I ignored him and let my allies mow down more shoreline guys, but eventually the sniper at the top actually just climbed down on its own, and they made quick work of him. This part took about an hour, but checkpoints helped, and once we were done, I set off some fireworks to celebrate, and we drove off. Then we sped off ignoring enemies and making our way to another drawbridge where we faced more enemies, who, get this, wouldn't let us progress, but Sam and Sully obliterate them. We go cliff diving in our Jeep and come to one final spot where we get ambushed by 4 enemies. Sam and Sully took out 2 of them, but no matter how long I waited or how much damage I put into the armored enemies, Sam and Sully would not kill them. So I deduced that allies wouldn't kill armored enemies and did it myself. This is also a rule I used for the rest of the playthrough, where if there were armored enemies, I generally took them out. More enemies drop in, as is tradition at this point, and 2 of them were armored, so I had to murder them as well, but that was it. You also need to kill all of the enemies in this section because it triggers the end of the level, so if you leave any alive, the game just won't progress. So 4 more kills in the previous chapter brings our total count to 16. Hidden in plain sight allows you to explore this marketplace, and you get to pet this lemur. But in one of gaming's most shocking betrayals, he ends up stealing your apple.
He stole my apple!
Absolutely devastating. Then we climb this tower and solve some puzzles, and it's pretty chill until we climb back down and get confronted by Shoreline. You can run past them in the marketplace, and once you're driving in the car, just avoid the temptation to mow them down like you're playing GTA. Eventually, you use your hook to latch onto one of their trucks, and that's where the real trouble begins. So there's a big truck you can kind of maneuver on, but eventually it starts catching fire and you need to jump to another vehicle or you die. A similar truck appears, but after that one you have to jump onto a Jeep. The only Jeep nearby has 2 people in it and you can't jump onto a motorcycle, so we are forced to kill 2 enemies here. Soon you have to jump onto another big truck and do the same thing where you go to another Jeep with 2 more people, which adds another 2 kills. Of course, we're not done yet because you then crash your car and have no choice but to shoot 2 enemies. You can't move, and Sam isn't here to help out, so we have to add 2 more kills. Then you get on Sam's motorcycle and start shooting at the big machine gun truck chasing you down, which luckily doesn't add to our enemy's defeated counter when we blow up the truck, so responsibility avoided. The next chapter at sea is super peaceful, and thank God, we get to ride around in a boat, play Marco Polo,
Marco what?
and swim with some dolphins. No enemies here. We do get some more flashbacks to the prologue, since that scene takes place directly after this chapter, but luckily I don't have to relive the guilt of indirectly murdering 2 people on a boat that I couldn't even see on my screen. Thanks again, Naughty Dog, for blaming me for those guys' deaths.
The truth is obvious. The guilty party sits among us.
I judge the defendant guilty as charged. I hereby order the defendant to clean this entire island.
The next 2 chapters can be done mostly in stealth, and there's actually an entire trophy for going through these chapters without killing any enemies, so I'm not going to expand upon them too much. You do some exploring with Sam and learn more about the Thieves of Libertalia in a chapter with the same name. No violence committed by me here, just don't shoot the few enemies that do show up, but we do see Rafe and Nadine again, who completely beat our ass. When Sam is holding Nadine hostage, Rafe says,
"Oh, don't worry about him, Nadine. These guys don't kill anyone in cold blood. It's just not their style."
Except for like a dozen auction guards who are just doing their job, but hey, who's counting? I mean, aside from the stats page. Another flashback in The Brothers Drake, and no murder here, just breaking and entering as we explore this house. Though technically we're not responsible for this woman's death, the devs are once again trying to put blame on me because she just dies right as we enter her office. So naturally, the police treat this like a 5-star wanted level in GTA.
Give it up!
Eventually we shake the police, and we're done with this chapter. Well, this playthrough has already been a struggle even with Sam and Sully helping me out, but now we get to continue with Elena, who is much more hesitant to commit murder and probably has a conscience or whatever, unlike Sam. So now we sneak back to Elena's Jeep, avoid running over any enemies, and make our way to this old elevator where we immediately get ambushed. Initially, I spent a long time trying to figure this one out, as Elena would sometimes be super aggressive and kill like 3 enemies off the bat, but other times she would just use her infinite ammo pistol to do absolutely nothing. The elevator basically stalls until you kill more enemies, so I was stuck hanging here. I thought I would have to kill a few guys in order to move the elevator, and because more enemies spawn once the elevator does move from every angle, you can't even take cover and wait for Elena to kill them. I tried so many strats, but eventually I discovered that the elevator actually does move if you climb high enough, even if you don't kill all of the enemies. There's a super specific path you can take that avoids the sniper up top, allows more enemies to spawn in, and if you're quick enough, you can hit a checkpoint before you get mowed down. From that checkpoint, you can make your way over to this waterfall, avoiding gunfire, swing across a gap, and make it to the top of the elevator, where Elena bursts through like the Kool-Aid Man and kills 2 more enemies for you. Of course, this whole elevator sequence is basically a waste since the car goes off a bridge into rushing water and you lose it.
Turn around, we're heading for the falls!
Oh, you mean this isn't the right way to go? Alright, let me just shift gears really quick. Well, guess we're not getting that security deposit back.
Okay!
So I make my way forward on foot, Elena just kind of teleports, and there's a few enemies we have to sneak by until we get to Avery's house. Avery's house is the worst part of the game. It does not get worse than right here. You follow a trail to a barricaded door, which, surprise, it's another ambush. You can't go through this door until you kill everyone in the building. You can get back into stealth, but even then you still don't get a prompt to open the door. It only appears when you kill everyone. I think I spent around 8 hours in this one trying to get it down to no kills, but Elena didn't want to do it. So I said Elena wasn't quite as effective at killing as Sam and Sully, which is putting it lightly, but hey, I'm protective of my wife. Basically, Sam and Sully will sometimes grab enemies in a chokehold for you to kill, but if you don't, then they'll kill them for you. Elena will jump on an enemy's back for you to kill, but she won't always kill him, which is brutal because sometimes she would jump on a guy like 2 or 3 times, but I'm not sure what signal she's sending me there. So this section is divided into 2 waves with an overwhelming number of enemies. The first has 11 enemies and the second is triggered by killing the heavy with the machine gun or by killing 8 enemies aside from him. I first killed the heavy, but then that made the second checkpoint have like 16 enemies at once and that was not viable. So I decided to prioritize killing the hardest enemies and the ones I thought Elena wouldn't kill, which were the armored guys and 2 snipers. In the first wave, I only killed the 2 snipers and let Elena cut down the enemies to the bare minimum. The second wave had 6 more enemies, but on average they were more powerful, so this was super painful. 2 guys with grenade launchers and another armored guy come in at this part, and I killed the heavy with the machine gun once the second wave spawned, alongside 2 grenade launcher guys. One of them had armor, so technically Elena could kill the other, but I couldn't get her to do it without me dying. The other enemy was an armored guy with an assault rifle, who was a pain because he could mow me down pretty quickly. Anyway, this part was hell, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I ended up with about 6 kills in this part out of like 17 enemies. It was rough. Luckily, Elena did come through with a lot of patience. I think she was still mad that I lied to her about the Malaysia job because she really let these guys obliterate me hundreds of times before we passed this encounter. Anyway, thank you Elena for being a god-tier wife. Chloe who? I only know Elena. After exploring Avery's house and going into a secret tunnel, we get to another painful encounter. The first area is basically impossible to avoid killing anyone just with the sheer amount of enemies in such a small enclosed space. Uncharted is a linear game, but this part is so insanely limited on where you can go and you don't have any options aside from fighting. This area has wooden crates, but the enemies quickly destroy those, and if you fall back to the brick walls, there's nowhere to maneuver before being overrun by enemies. The key for me here was to take out the shotgun guys and anyone else who came to where I was hiding. The section has about 15 enemies in 3 waves, and Elena was super inconsistent as to how often she would engage, so I had to take matters into my own hands. There isn't much we can do to cut down the number of kills here, and running doesn't work because of the sheer number of enemies. The best I could do here was 8 kills. Elena was a little slow, but still helpful. I think that you could maybe shave this number down by 1 or 2 kills, but it largely depends on how useful Elena is and how aggressive the enemies are. I wasn't completely happy with this section, but the way it's structured leaves so much up to RNG and luck that I was losing my mind pretty quickly. Also, you can't really run past these guys because the next checkpoint only gets activated when you kill all of them. Otherwise, you're back to the start of the first section. Okay, I did some extra testing and discovered that you can actually get the second checkpoint if you kill the final armored enemy and leave a few guys alive, but he only spawns when you reach an archway far into the room, so you'd have to kill most of the enemies in there to get to him anyway. The second area has 6 enemies. 2 shotgun guys get killed with an exploding mummy if you wait, and this doesn't count towards your enemy's defeated stat, so this is fine. Immediately after that, I booked it to the next area where you drop into a section with a shotgun guy and a heavy gunner. If you get lucky, the shotgun guy gets too busy dealing with Elena, and the gunner sets off a mummy that gives you an exit in the floor. So, I got through the cave section with 8 kills, all in that first part. We left the cave and made our way to the beach. The way Elena carried me on her back the last couple chapters was so immense I had to thank her by literally climbing on her back. Right outside the cave, there were about 10 enemies. To progress, you need to take most of them out, which I thought would be a pain, but I found this little waterlogged boat I could hide in, and it had full cover. Enemies couldn't flank me because they behave kind of weirdly when it comes to swimming, and they couldn't do much but get taken out by Elena. She took out 6 of them, and the remaining 4 were bound to a certain zone, so I had to kind of lead her over there to kill them for me. With about 2 enemies left, the ship blew open, and a bunch of enemies, including 2 heavy machine gun guys, ran out. I thought I'd have to kill them, but I actually just ran into the ship and was on to the next checkpoint with no kills at that beach section. Inside the ship are 8 enemies, and you need to get to the back of the ship to continue, and you need a button prompt to clear some debris, which doesn't appear until after you kill all of the enemies inside. I ended up killing 2 enemies here, a grenade launcher guy and a shotgun guy, both of which had armor, so I had to take them out because Elena wouldn't. She was able to take out the rest of the enemies. And the final 3 guys are zoned to stay in a really tiny area and wouldn't move out of there, but she still killed them all. Outside of the ship are a bunch of enemies with shotguns, but I just sprinted past them and on to the next checkpoint. The final part of this chapter has 6 enemies, and one of them has armor. You need Sam to lower a ladder for you here, but he won't do it until all of the enemies are dead. Sam and Elena will take out 5 of the enemies, but they won't take out the armored enemy, so you have to take him out yourself. Next up, you get pinned by a guy with a rocket launcher. Luckily, you have Sam and Elena right by your side because wow, are they useful together. I hid for a while during this and they killed everyone except for another armored enemy and the rocket launcher guy. So 1 kill for the armored guy brings us to 40 kills. Elena and Sam won't climb up to the rocket launcher guy and he won't jump down. Their bullets also don't seem to affect him despite being super effective on like every other enemy in this level, but that's 1 more kill for me. After this encounter, more enemies spawn on a ship across a gap, and you need to kill one of 2 guys holding an RPG near a giant post to get across. This is scripted, so you have to shoot at least one of them, but for some reason, this doesn't add to our enemies defeated stats, so even though I killed both of them, it just doesn't count. Gee, that sure would have been useful for all the other rocket launcher guys I was forced to kill. Once you cross the gap, Sam and Elena kill the remaining enemies pretty easily. More of them spawn in, and one is a heavy type, so we do have to kill this guy. They take out the rest, and then once the enemies on the ship are taken out, Elena will help you leave the boat. Finally, you get separated from Sam and Elena, and you're on a beach alone with a bunch of enemies. Literal nightmare scenario because you can't rely on allies to get kills. You can run until you get to a big wooden door, but this is blocked. If you go there, more enemies spawn in, but this gives us a checkpoint past the start of the beach. Using that checkpoint, I was able to quickly grab an RPG and fire twice at this gun vehicle which unblocks wooden door in our way and allows us to progress without killing. Again, destroying this vehicle doesn't add to our kill counter, so we're vindicated of murder charges once more. Finally, we get chased by a second tank and eventually blow this one up, but once again, this doesn't increase our enemies defeated. Sam is obsessed with this little treasure hunt, so in Brother's Keeper, we make a return to go find Avery's treasure. This is a very short section just to catch Sam, and you don't encounter any enemies here, just basically scale a mountain and go into a cave. Finally, the titular chapter, A Thief's End. We get a sick set piece and a pretty fun sword fight with Rafe that I was terrible at doing. Also, Nate technically kills Rafe here, but killing him doesn't add to the counter. The only thing left now is the epilogue where we of course play as Nate and Elena's daughter, Cassie. And of course, as we all know, teenage girls are incapable of murder, so we're all good. I think. So we can't increase our kill count anymore, and we all live happily ever after. Overall, I had to take out 42 enemies. Technically, I think that number should be lower because of Nate knocking out enemies in the prison fight, and also the 2 enemies who died in the prologue that I wasn't really responsible for, but hey, can't argue too much with objective stats. The allies in this game were surprisingly useful, though some more than others. Elena. Most of the kills were on powerful enemies that my allies wouldn't take out, or on enemies the game forced me to personally massacre in order to progress. I knew that Uncharted 4 would be much tougher to do a pacifist run-in compared to The Last of Us Part 2, just because of how action-heavy it is, and boy was I right. So many sequences are straight up designed for killing that running and avoiding conflict is rarely an option. I really enjoyed this game and feel like it's a nice end to Nathan Drake's story, but for now, I think I'd prefer to embrace some of that ludonarrative dissonance and just play through being as violent as possible. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to drop a like and tell me what you think, and subscribe to Epic Cakes Gaming for more of these types of videos in the future. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.